Now we are joined from Washington, D.C. by Asia One correspondent Jagruti Dave. Jagruti, thank you so much for joining us once again. So what are you hearing from White House? And so what are the sources saying on why the strike stopped?
We're getting reports that there are a number of reasons why there's been a 2-day pause at this juncture. The president has been talking to his aides, and reports are emerging of some of the advice that they've given him. Some of the things that they are saying is they are concerned about diminishing supplies of munitions that could put expanded operations at risk. And the recent fatalities, American fatalities in the region, are perhaps shining more of a spotlight on the risks to American lives of troops there associated with the ongoing operation, but also an expansion of the war, if that is one of the considerations that the president is going to be making as he considers whether to pause for longer or whether to expand. The New York Times is also saying that the advisors are worried about the widening of the war in the region, causing further instability of perhaps alienating, as they put it, US allies in the Gulf, and also broader concerns about the impact of continued strikes on the global economy, with shipping stalled in the Strait of Hormuz, which accounts for 20% of the global oil trade at the height of its on operations before the war, but also the impact, as I say, to the global economy, but to trade and security.
President Trump is saying that basically talks are progressing while also threatening more strikes. So what's your read from officials on the ground?
So there are many different interpretations, I suppose, that experts are looking to, people analysing the situation from reports from people close to the president speaking anonymously. And as I say, this cessation, according to the reporting, is from warnings and cautions issued by aides who've been talking to the president. On the other hand, there's some analysts who say that this is, a hot and cold approach by Washington, and this is a strategic maneuver to keep Iran guessing, to 1 minute hit with strikes, the next to pause and consider diplomacy, as a way of putting stress on Iran to come to the negotiating table. But other experts say that actually that as a strategy is not working. Iran is taking the beating and it is still pursuing its strategy. So further military expansion is not bringing Iran back to the table and making it change its stance. So some say that this is a strategy of military pressure is not working, and that could be why they're changing tack and going back to diplomacy. Another reasoning is that the timing coincides with talks by Oman and Iran on the Strait of Hormuz over, the Financial Times is reporting, negotiations seem to be about the routes, whether which route ships should use, whether it's the Iran preferred route or the US preferred route, which is hugging the Omani coastline. But this is all about disputes over control over the Strait of Hormuz, which have not gone away. That situation has not changed. And the US has been adamant publicly that giving Iran control over the Strait of Hormuz, in that it would allowing it to pursue tolls, for example, would be unprecedented and would not set a good precedent for other disputed waterways around the world. So publicly, that is something that Washington is very much against. But of course, this is leverage that Iran has now that it did not exercise before the start of this war. And so it seems that Iran is going to be very reluctant to relinquish that, at least that level of control and power that it sees that it has as negotiations continue, which they appear to be doing so at this stage.
With gas prices climbing and midterms coming up, so is there any real political pressure, do you think, building on Trump over this war?
Well, Donald Trump said during his meeting with the Lebanese leader in the White House, when he was talking to reporters before that meeting, that the midterms do not influence his planning on Iran. Now, clearly, the global pressures on the economy posed by the stalemate in the Strait of Hormuz is having an impact on the advice that he's getting from advisors, according to the media reports that we are seeing here. And even if the president is adamant that he's not going to be pressured by the midterms, many of his members of his own party, the Republicans, clearly are going to be feeling the pressure, as high oil and gas prices, something that cost of living was something that Americans were already worried about before the war. And so you've seen, gas prices here in the US go beyond, on average across the country, $4 a gallon. And they are asking, the Republicans are going to have to justify the war and the costs to the American people. So, as I say, while the president is saying that the midterms aren't affecting his war planning, I think there is to some extent the wider impacts of the war on the economy. That is certainly going to have an impact on the president's decision making. Obviously, as you go into the midterms, the emphasis on the economy is something that many of his advisors have been pressing. Many Republicans have been saying they wish the president would talk more about the economy. The White House tries to do that from the podium with the press secretary. The president, when he goes around the country, the economy is clearly top of the agenda when he gives speeches. But of course, the war and foreign affairs has, in the last many months, taken the front line over the economy. And so these are obviously concerns that are going to be discussed by his aides, who then go and give him advice.
Any signal from Pentagon or State Department on whether the pause holds, or are they bracing for strikes to resume, do you think?
Well, the president, we understand, is the one who called for the cessation of the strikes for the last 2 days. And so it very much seems to depend on what the president orders military officials to do. The Pentagon is saying that they are ready. That President Trump has said the US is locked and loaded. But as we've been hearing from reports, there are concerns about dwindling munitions supplies. So those are clearly going to be concerns. And this is something that when Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, was speaking to the Senate, he said the cost of the war was above 37 billion US dollars, and that he was asking for more money as part of the defense budget, and a significant amount of that would be earmarked for the Iran war. And he said that there would be a critical shortfall in things like in things like munitions and being able to pay troops wages if the Senate did not agree to additional budgetary considerations. So I think these are ongoing concerns in the background, with the amount of munitions that the US has in its stockpile. But Washington is publicly saying that the US is ready for an expansion of the war if Iran is not serious in talks, which is something that it's accused Iran of consistently. The president said of late Iran appears to be more serious in his estimation, in these negotiations. So, a second day of a lull in attacks. There are reasons to be, in that sense, hopeful. Following 2 weeks of strikes, you've got 2 days of pause. There's reasons to be hopeful that negotiations are being pursued more earnestly. But also, given that we've been here before, the lull might not last for very long.
Many thanks. Many thanks, Jagruti.